The purpose of this video is to show you how to shorten the stock exhaust on the Honda Grom. Now, it's not legal in every jurisdiction, so please check with your local laws before continuing. The main purpose is not for a power increase, but mostly to increase the volume of the exhaust sound, as well as to decrease the weight of the muffler on the bike. So first, you need to start off by removing the heat shield on the right-hand side of the bike. There's just a single Allen head bolt that holds the plastic heat shield on, and then it slides forward. With the plastic heat shield removed, there's a metal heat shield held beneath. Again, a single 10mm bolt is removed, and just like the plastic heat shield, it slides forward. Now, with that heat shield removed, there are two bolts that are holding the muffler on, and then there's one exhaust clamp holding it to the mid-pipe. Now, in my case, the bolt holding the muffler clamp was a bit rusted, and my bike's only a year old with only 2,500 miles, so I ended up having to use some penetrating oil and take the clamp off entirely and remove the last little bit of bolt that had snapped off. So I suggest you put some penetrating oil on it a day or two before you attempt this. That way when you try to remove the stock muffler, you don't run into any issues with the bolt breaking like I did. Once you've got the exhaust clamp removed and the two bolts holding the muffler on removed, I suggest rotating the muffler to the side like this. The purpose of this is just so that as you slowly wiggle the muffler off of the mid-pipe, you don't end up scraping the muffler brackets on the body of the bike anywhere. Now that we've got the muffler out of the way, we can begin work on this. The first thing you need to do is find a 3/16 drill bit so that you can drill out the 3 rivets holding the end cap onto the end of the muffler. Once you've drilled out the rivets, you can simply pull the end cap straight off, and then we can then mask off the area that we would like to cut. We're going to look at the bracket that is on the middle of the muffler, and you'll find that there's a slit in the middle of that bracket. There's kind of a front piece and a back piece. We're going to mark our cut exactly in the middle of that bracket. As you can see in this picture, I placed green painter's tape around the muffler so I can make a straight cut. And you can see in this picture that there's 2 pieces of the bracket at the very bottom. The left piece is on the part of the muffler that we want to keep, and the other part of the bracket is on the right piece that we wanted to keep. So that slit in the middle of it is a perfect mark for where we need to cut. When cutting, you need to make sure to not cut very deep. I wouldn't suggest using an angle grinder or any other cutting tool such as that. The purpose here is just to get through the outer metal casing, which is about 1/8 of an inch thick, a couple of millimeters thick. And that outer metal casing is quite hard and takes a while to cut through. But once you get through that, there's a very thin piece of metal on the inside, which you can see on the left portion of the muffler in this picture. That left piece is what we're going to slide the end cap on once we're done. So we need to make sure not to cut through that. We just need to cut through the outer body. Once we've separated the two halves, you can see on the right half, the piece that we were cutting off or removing, this is what the inside of the muffler looks like. Our cut ended up removing the entire baffling chamber because the front half of the muffler is just an open body with a perforated tube. The back half of the muffler had a solid plate on it and a single inlet tube that was not aligned with the outlet tube on the front half. So on the back half of this muffler, exhaust flows in through the little pipe you see there, and it goes through into the baffled chamber in this back half of the muffler, and it flows through a couple of pipes in there, and then it ends up coming out through the curved pipe that we saw after we removed the end cap. So this portion of the muffler is actually the heaviest, and this is the part that quiets the muffler down. So this is the only piece really worth removing in this. What we're left with is just this front piece of the muffler. It's about half of the muffler, and if you look inside of it, there's just a large open body with a single perforated tube. Exhaust comes through that and out the little holes. If you feel like it, you can drill out the end cap on that pipe. It won't change the volume significantly, and it definitely doesn't change the horsepower. This modification is strictly for sound and weight savings. If you're looking for additional power, you're going to need to change the header, because the header has a catalytic converter in it. After I made the cut, and I had this piece remaining, I did use some high temperature exhaust paint, flat black in color, and I cleaned up the edges where I had cut. As you can see on this picture, there's a couple little scuffs along the edge from cutting it, and I wanted those returned back to a nice flat black paint just like it was before. So I painted that and I let that dry. Now we're ready to fit the end cap. First, slide the end cap onto the end of the muffler body, make sure to get the alignment of the end cap the way you're looking for, and then, using a 3/16 drill bit again, drill out 3 new holes to hold the end cap on. Make sure to note where these are. We're going to use these here in just a minute. I placed a layer of RTV, which is room temperature vulcanization silicon. It's a gasket material, but either way, I placed a layer of RTV silicon around that inner metal band that I'm going to slide my end cap on. And the purpose for that is not because I'm really concerned about the end cap staying or vibrating or anything. It was really to make sure that the end cap made a nice tight seal and no exhaust would flow out around the end cap. If you try sliding it on, you'll see what I'm talking about. There's going to be a small gap or a little bit of room where exhaust could come out, and I wanted to make sure all the exhaust was coming out the end cap of my muffler. Once I had the RTV silicon in place, I put my end cap on. With the end cap now placed on the muffler, I used 3 5/32 sized aluminum pop rivets to secure the end cap back in place with the new holes that I drilled prior to putting the silicon on the muffler body. Then I set the entire muffler assembly aside and I let it dry overnight. The following morning, I took the muffler body and I placed it back with the new exhaust clamp and the new bolt to replace the broken one back on the mid pipe for the bike. Remember, I've rotated the muffler out to the side to make sure that the brackets don't accidentally scratch any of the Grom's bodywork. Then, I rotated the muffler in place, and I placed the 2 bolts to hold the muffler on back into their brackets and tightened them. Then I tightened the clamp that held the muffler to the mid pipe. Next, I took my heat shield, which as you can see, I've trimmed down. Now, many people don't reinstall the heat shield after doing this modification, but I wanted it to look a little more stock. So I trimmed mine, and then I also cleaned it up with some flat black paint. I slid the heat shield back into its bracket, and using a 10mm socket, I secured it with its retaining bolt. Then, using my shortened plastic heat shield, I slid it into place on the metal heat shield, and tightened it back down with its single bolt. As you can see, the heat shield still continues to set out from the muffler, and though it's short, it does make it appear to set out further than before, simply an issue of perspective from the muffler being stubby, but it does look relatively stock. The best part is the change in sound, however. The bike has a much deeper tone and a much quicker exhaust response. No longer is it a quiet purr, but rather a small notification that you're there. It does not equal the volume of any of the aftermarket systems, but it's a big improvement over stock until you can save up to purchase one of the aftermarket exhausts. If you have any questions, let me know.